Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time thanks to your generous support, shares and views, with multiple uploads every week to help share the rich history of monsters, locations and mythologies of D&D. Last week we talked about the Lady of Pain, her absolute, though when you think about it, quite hands-off rulership of the dimensional super nexus, the Cage, the city known as Sigil. Oh, and again, a note on the way that people who travel the planes name the city. Yes, I know it looks like it should be pronounced Sigil, but that is just so that people who are new to the place are very easy to spot, because the clueless, as they are known by the locals of Sigil, can get you killed by the 1001 other ignorances that surround them like a cotton candy cloud. This little trick works the other way around also, as the Cages can get so used to saying it that they may not realize when they shouldn't. Ignorance can sometimes keep one alive in the very worst company. Talking of bad company, the population of Sigil is, as you can scarcely imagine, a complete riot of different individuals from across the multiverse, and where your feet hit the cold and wet cobblestone of the city, your eyes peering through the mist and murk to strange buildings and dangerous-looking dark vines, your concept of a fair and balanced set of rules, a sane and orderly universe, some sort of master in control of the grand scheme and the game of existence, is all thrown into question. Yet, this city still works. Sure, there are moments of mayhem, and in the darkest under-alleys all bets are off, but for the most part, things just seem to arrange themselves organically into a complex strata of groups and self-interests that play off against each other in such a way that it's possible to live some sort of a sane life, even in one of the most insane places. This is not just because of the ever-present, clearly understood and dire threat of the Lady of Pain herself, or the ever-watchful eyes of her Dabu, cleaning up the mess, maintaining the structures and the props like stagehands to a very special, very elaborate theatre. It's also because of the factions. This is the first in a little series of videos all about them. I'll be directly quoting from a wide range of sources, including realmani.org and Wikipedia, Factal's Manifesto, In the Cage, Planewalker's Handbook, Player's Primer to the Outlands, various Dragon magazines, and other sources. I'll be inserting my own little take on things, some of the aspects, but generally what follows is all from published sources, though I will be excluding a lot of recent events in Sigil, such as the upheaval and the faction war, as I think it's best to start off with a more cohesive and orderly version of Sigil, and that the players can then be let loose in Sigil and, well, the chips fall where they may. If we may step away from the lore inside the game for a moment and look at the lore of the game, the factions are a response by D&D to cash in on the very popular trend in gaming at the time, spearheaded by the clans of Vampire the Masquerade. When Planescape was created, the idea of building philosophical roles, allegiances and divisions into the interdimensional politics of the multiverse was, and still is, the most elegant and brilliant solution to how to structure a cohesive story and plot over such a vast, limitless vista of possibilities. You could say that it took the original idea of alignments and took it to its logical extreme. When faced with the question of life, the universe and everything, intelligent beings seek meaning and answers, and factions are the representation of those answers that these beings have formed and their culture and identity which have built up around it. The population of Sigil fluctuates a lot, but it generally sits around 650,000 beings most of the time. Roughly 37% of the population is made up of humans. It's been like that for at least the last 1,000 years, but to many older individuals and organizations of the place, this is just still considered to be something relatively new. It's an exciting era of change in the Cage. In the City of Doors, law and order is maintained on the day-to-day by the governors and the hardheads. The governors faction is more officially known as the Fraternity of Order, and yes, they do call the Hall of Records their headquarters and deal with legal matters, tax collection and natural justice. They basically believe that reality exists independently of consciousness, that anyone is capable of objective knowledge, and personal excellence is the best way to make use of one's efforts, personal excellence. So that they see the law as upholding the rights of an individual to self-determination and freedom to better themselves. They also believe in social Darwinism, in that it is natural law that the most capable beings rise through sheer survival and fitness. They make for excellent lawyers, and they study a lot and are experts in the art of debate. Don't forget, this is one of the oldest and most cohesive social structures in the multiverse, and inside the multiverse, the most oldest and cohesive social structures are the Celestials and the infernal hierarchies. So these lawyers of Sigil routinely get into legal battles with devils and angels. So they put a lot of stock in wisdom, and the best of them think that crime is just a symptom of ignorance and mental illness. The worst of them are little better than the devils themselves. They keep all judicial records in Sigil going back to the very founding of their own order, as well as all historical and governmental records of the same. They track the portals of Sigil, probably providing one of the most reliable resources for records on shifting portals, though access to these records is, of course, tightly controlled. In a nutshell, the core beliefs of the Fraternity of Order are the same as those first set down by Fractal Clariel nearly a millennium ago. The structure of reality can be divided into three categories as per the three rules or three laws. They are the rules, the laws, and the axioms. Rules are those structures instituted by mortals, the governments, bureaucracies, and organizations constructed so that society can function. Laws are those structures instituted by the powers, and in Planescape the powers are gods, primordial super beings, immortals and such. Then there are the laws of nature that direct how the universe and the multiverse itself functions. Finally, the axioms are those structures instituted by the multiverse itself and the underlying truths that all within reality must abide by, that can never be bent or broken, and that bind all. We basically call these the laws of physics. To understand these structures is to understand their limits and potentially even exploit those limits. The search for axioms is essentially what mathematicians, philosophers, and physicists and scientists of all stripes are devoted to. Replicable facts, things that are true 100% of the time. The structure of the factions themselves are all based on the Fraternity of Order, as it is kind of the granddaddy of all the other factions as far as mortal creatures are concerned, particularly those that are from the planets that make up the prime material universe, who are known as primes, the people who come from those planets. Well over 1,000 years ago, there was a major influx of primes from the world of Oath, the name of the Greyhawk setting in the original D&D. Thousands of prime arcanists with a passing familiarity with the planes but little practical knowledge suddenly walked the streets of Sigil to escape the destruction of their homeland, holding a long tradition of understanding and interpreting reality, even the arcane, through the lenses of law and physics. Of these refugees, the noblewoman Clariel soon grew to prominence as a tremendously generous patron of science. Seeking to better understand her new home, she gave numerous donations of the wealth that she carried with her from Earth to the peoples and institutions of Sigil, founding dozens of academic and research efforts. From this foundation, the Fraternity of Order grew, and the first faction. So, see, then the nation that these refugees came from was Sulios, which, if I'm pronouncing that rightly, Sulois? Could be. That was a rigid caste-based society, a lot of laws and structures and social division. So the first faction followed those same cultural models. From the very start of the faction's existence, Fractal Clariel and her colleagues sought to cement the importance of the fraternity to the planewalkers and travellers of Sigil, planar and prime alike. They became a bastion of knowledge. They began the first records of Sigil itself, tracking the events of the city, and they spread the system of the faction charter, a codex, of basically the groups and their beliefs. And the city's factions then became more legitimate. They had a greater air of officiality. And when dealing with the more long-standing organizations outside the city, they found it easier to have this codified nature about them, this legitimacy. They founded the cross-planar timekeeping and calendar systems that are still in use today within and beyond the City of Doors, and one of the most auspicious and ultimately successful efforts that they even looked to enforce a degree of order upon the Abyss itself, which is a preposterous notion from our point of view, but the governors thought there must be a truth and a structure even to the most evil chaos, and began the lexicon of the Abyss, which is how we assign numbers to the discovered layers on the of the planes, the layers of the Abyss, on the suggestion of Clariel's close advisor Alonthus the Dark and his party's discovery of the abandoned observatory of the Oberth Kabiri. So the planes of the layers of the Abyss have their numbers thanks to the discoveries of this observatory and the Fraternity of Order. The Fraternity of Order makes up not only those members who accept the fundamental nature of reality as built on laws and swear to act accordingly. As a result, all members of the fraternity obviously have a more lawful bent to their alignment, with the majority having also a neutral ethical outlook. Beyond this, there are no really no restrictions on who may join the fraternity. Some individuals that show a special skill in pursuing or understanding an underlying truth of the multiverse are actively recruited by the faction, and their knowledge and research would be added to the whole of the fraternity, but otherwise recruitment efforts are scant. Those who belong to the fraternity tend to gravitate into it, and this is fairly true of most of the different fraternities. If you belong there, generally speaking, you'll be welcome there. All members are expected to provide regular and direct service to the faction, though this requirement is somewhat flexible for the higher placed civilians that have other means of serving the faction or working in the courts or the stacks, or those that do directly serve the faction. The lowest ranks are the aides, those who act like file clerks, court recorders, research assistants, personal assistants, field researchers and other such roles, intended to get them accustomed to the ways of the faction. So, they work on research and legal aspects and things like that. Aides are usually shifted from role to role, allowing them to see all sides of the fraternity, kind of like unpaid interns, you could say. Above the aides are the administrators, the administratum. Members can only reach this rank by proving their understanding through the demonstration or of the discovery of a loophole in reality as a result of their studies. So it's kind of like a doctorate thesis. Once having proved their skills, they are granted option of choosing the path and the bureau that they serve, whether it be in Sigil, in one of the fraternity's field facilities, or generally just abroad, learning and gathering facts and data. Those acting abroad continue their studies and observations directly, most choosing to focus their attentions in Mechanis or the Astral Sea, because these places tend to influence the entire multiverse. So if it is happening somewhere in the multiverse, there's a reflection of it in the astral, or there's a mechanical aspect of it which has its origin in Mechanis. While those studying within a fraternity office take on managerial roles within the factions to serve the higher ranks as assistants and apprentices, keeping track of everything, keeping records and keeping everybody informed of what's going on. Administrators range from rank A5, the lowest, to rank A1, the highest, and barring the extreme circumstances, only those reaching A1 are allowed to move upwards in rank. The highest rank below the factal itself is that of the bureau chief. Such members lead the various bureaus of the fraternity, such as the few bureau chiefs serve in the field, though each plane does have at least one ad hoc field bureau somewhere devoted to its analysis. All operations of the fraternity are done under the auspices of some bureau or the other, kind of like FBI or CIA or that sort of thing. Some permanent established and others are more temporary ad hoc bureaus established as needed, sort of field bases, and they some of them have existed for centuries because things just keep continuing on. And each bureau must have its own bureau chief. Judges and the court functionaries, given their required existence, are each considered to be the head of the ad hoc bureau that legal court deals with, to ensure that only those most aware of their surroundings and the workings of law there are granted such lofty roles, such as administrators, bureau chiefs, ranking from B5 to B1. In general, the more important the bureau, the higher the rank of its chief. While permanent bureaus can be led by a bureau chief of any rank, ad hoc bureaus take only one bureau chief of rank B2 or lower. By custom, the so-called star bureaus, these most key to the faction's operations, are record-keeping, research, internal affairs, planner affairs, and prime affairs. As a player character, you're going to deal with one of those at some point, if you're doing anything officially in Sigil. And they are always led by one B1 chief, and these bureau chiefs tend to act as sort of a cabinet to the current factal. And the position of factal is an elected lifetime role, vacated only upon death or retirement. Upon retirement, the former factal is assigned the honorary rank of a B1 bureau chief and no associated duties but what they choose to take on. So they're kind of wandering experts. In any event, the new factal is selected from all current B1 bureau chiefs by a general vote of all active members of the fraternity, and it's kind of a popularity vote, but it's generally pretty clear that the most suitable person for the position is elected, because really they decide the fate of all the different places, so it's very political. The elected member immediately takes the role of factor upon the counting and verification of the votes, and the first act most often is the promotion of the new member to replace their vacated position, as makes sense. Obviously, the structure of the Fraternity of Order is the most by the book and well established. I went into some detail on it because it's a perfect example of how the factions work. The rest are all variations on this system, and they're all certainly a lot looser in their organisation. Outside of Sigil, the Fraternity of Order is concerned with the plane of Mechanus, the Clockwork Nirvana. As you would expect, they would be work closely with the factions called the Harmonium and the Mercy Killers and the Society of Sensation. They're pretty much in direct opposition to the factions called the Revolutionary League and the Zaucetex, which I will talk about later. Next on our tour of the factions are the Hardheads, or more formally, the Harmonium. Don't call them hardheads, by the way, they take offence to it. These folks are the law enforcers. If you think of Judge Dredd, the judges of Mega City 1 in the 2000 AD comics, you're not extremely far from exactly what they're like. They believe in law, and they believe they are the law. I am the law. They control an entire prime material world called Ortho, which is basically taken over by a band of adventurers 500 years ago, determined to rid the land of chaos, and against all sanity, completely succeeding. I could make an entire video on Ortho itself. Get this. The place is populated by humans, dwarves, orcs, and beholders who work together under the law of the Harmonium. The elves, gnomes, halflings, and fae have all been exterminated completely. Ortho is merely one of a number of Harmonium worlds in the Prime. However, an Imperium collectively known as the Orthan Empire. They have been successful in spreading their message to a number of realms within and without the Crystal Sphere, with most high-ups in the Harmonium having their origins in one of these lands. The Harmonium are constantly seeking out other potential colonies in the Prime, always looking to spread their message. Their role in Sigil may seem pretty clear-cut, but you will find that all of the factions have influence that spreads far farther than you would imagine. The hard-head who drags your thieving ass to the interrogation cells located in the barracks may well have been born and raised in a world dominated by the Harmonium religion. So they're not just doing their job, they're acting according to their faith, and they will use their metal-studded truncheon to subdue your heathen impulses with a lot of provocation, without a lot of provocation. So, be wise, be wary, ignorance is scary. The Harmonium get a lot of mentions in my video about the plane of Arcadia, so for more information on them and their activities there, that makes for some good watching. The Mercy Killers are the faction that the Harmonium will hand your character over to for some punishment if it's called for. They operate out of the headquarters in Sigil called the Prison, which is exactly what it is, a really, really bad prison. They are informally known as the Red Death, and they're all about justice and retribution. Their credo is mercy is for the weak. Currently, their ranks stand at about 25,000 strong. They are given the duties of watching over the prison, ensuring that all convicted criminals fulfill their sentences, and as part of this job, they also have the responsibilities for tracking down those who have escaped justice, either from the investigations of the Harmonium or from the prison itself, and of executing those judged to be deserving of that fate. There are three categories of crime in Sigil, loosely. That is felonies, which carry the sentence of death, misdemeanors, which get a character condemned to a decade of hard labour in the lower planes, or minor infractions, which will see a character thrown into the prison for 10 years, but at least they remain in Sigil for it, which isn't that bad. The Mercy Killers were originally two different factions, that being the Sons of Mercy and the Sod Killers. The Sons were advocates for the wrongly accused or those facing outlandishly bad punishments, and the Sods were basically hired goons that took money to track down and carry out revenge by proxy on whoever they were paid to brutalize. Both these factions organically gravitated to working together and became indistinguishable from each other after a while, so they gained that legitimacy by becoming a faction, an organized faction. The hierarchy of the Mercy Killers is fairly simple for a lawful organization, where with none of the expansive bureaucracy or complicated ranking system held by the Harmonium or the governors. Factotums within the Mercy Killers are known as justices, and those are members that have undergone an extensive training period in order to learn the law to an exacting degree. Those with a special aptitude for dispensing justice are promoted to the level of factor and given the name and rank of justicar. These members are those charged with tracking down criminals throughout the multiverse and bringing them back to face their punishment. Justicars are excused from all other duties or assignments in pursuit of their quarries, and a Justicar has been known to devote years, even a lifetime, in pursuit of their assigned lawbreaker. This sort of a role would appeal to a Hound Archon, for instance. Those selected to become Justicars are put through a 3-step process before being given their new rank. First, they are made to take an oath to pursue their assigned target, which they must sign in blood. This ensures the Justicar understands the importance of their duty and impresses upon them how great a task they're taking on. Second, a Justicar is linked to their target through a magical binding ceremony, which grants the Justicar an innate sense of the distance and direction to their target. This link functions even across the planes, and no spells or magical effects or items function to block the sense. The target usually feels a sense of impending doom at the completion of the ceremony, though they get no benefit from the link for obvious reasons. This ceremony can be, for the ceremony to be successful, some piece of evidence from the target's crime or some personal belonging of the criminal has to be used as a focus, and the Justicar's sense functions only as long as they keep this item on their person. If it's removed or destroyed, their sense of location is lost, and they could potentially be stranded somewhere in the multiverse, bereft of a direction to their target. Finally, the Justicar is granted a magical warrant of holding to use upon finding their quarry. This warrant acts as a scroll which contains a specialized whole person spell, basically a imprisonment spell, functioning only against the criminal named within and usable regardless of the Justicar's magical capabilities. When read, the spell takes effect immediately and the criminal is basically locked up inside this extra-dimensional space. As you can imagine, outside of Sigil, the Mercy Killers have a large military base in the gateway town to Archon called Vorkahan. Dating back as a faction holding to the days of the Sod Killers, this fortress stands... it's a city that stands on the corner of one of the more moderately sized cubes of Avalis, also commonly known as Vorkahan, which, if it needs naming at all, most people just know it as the Mercy Killers base. Carved like an Archeronian settlement, it's into the surface of the planet, or planetoid, or sphere, or cube, as though there were a single gargantuan object d'art. Its walls topped with adamantine spikes tipped with burning witch fire, serving as landmarks and warnings for cubes miles distance. Unlike many such cities, though, its work spanned the faces of all 3 faces of one corner, with an excessively strong winds blowing at the corners where gravity is weakest. Built out of naught but the metal and stone of Archon, Vorkahan has no city for the weak. Even its public fountains eschew water in favour of purifying acid, filling their city with a cloud that chokes the unwary, granting it the nickname the City of Fumes. Just a reminder, if you've not subscribed or have been subscribed for a long time but not watched a video from me in a while, it may help to unsub and resub again to make sure you click that notification bell, and you should see regular uploads from me each week, as well as my regular weekly live streams. Those who wish to explore the links in the description text under the video, you'll see links to my Patreon, with those heroes who support the channel. Anyone who donates at least $1 per month can get access to every one of the scripts I write for these videos, as well as having special access to me. You can request particular content from me, or I'll answer questions that you may have for your game. I will research things for you and answer to these questions to the best of my abilities. There's only one video that only patrons can see at the moment. There's occasionally videos that I'll post there in advance that patrons can see well in advance of everybody else. They also have exclusive access to the chat room, access to on my Discord server, but there's a link down below that anybody can join the server and get yourself schooled up on some tasty memes. Also, there's links to all of my different videos, and there's lists of things which I'm going to be making videos on in the future, as well as a suggestion list so that you can request topics even if you don't want to be a patron of mine, as well as links to merchandise for the channel. Oh, and Patron Blades. I highly recommend Patron Blades. I use them myself for a mighty smooth shave. As always, thanks for listening everyone, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.